Welcome back to the Raising Our Vibration podcast, where we explore higher consciousness through spiritual practice. And today, Stephen and I are very happy to have Lisa Gale join us. And we're going to talk about dream work and brain health, subtle energy, transformational education, and who knows what else, but a lot of wonderful topics for us to dive into. Let me begin just reading a short bio for Lisa, and then we'll get right into some questions and conversation. So Lisa received degrees from traditional universities in economics, early childhood, and elementary education. After what some would call a dark night of the soul season, followed by a prolonged Kundalini awakening in 2010, her entire life transformed. As the mother of 3 children, she was compelled to do everything possible to be her best self and leave a legacy of brighter possibilities for the next generation. She explored non-traditional education through degree programs in holistic education and shamanic studies in Ireland, as well as dowsing, yoga, and intuitive arts. The intention to support parents and educators in search of meaningful learning has led her to founding a nonprofit organization, Texas Holistic Educators, that focuses on the true heart of education and inspired learning. And she's also the founder of Global Dream Circles, which is an offshoot of that project. So welcome, Lisa. It's so wonderful to have you join us. And if we could just begin by having you talk a little bit about your early life and maybe some foundational moments or insights or seeds that might have sprouted into what you do now, and then maybe lead that into what happened to you around 2010 and how that really changed your life. And so,
okay,
all yours.
It's an honor to be here with you both. That's an interesting way to start with childhood, because I'm sure in a lot of ways it's informed much of what interests me in terms of connecting with work in the world. I was, like many sort of souls who rode in on the indigo wave, did not come to a family that was ready and willing to support my spiritual awakening. Came to a very different kind of family. I grew up in rural Texas with a mom who was in oil and gas and a dad who's a cattle farm and rancher. And so, you know, when you think of Texas stereotypes, I guess those things might come to mind for people.
For sure.
I remember always talking with, you know, what I later learned was probably animal spirits and plant spirits. These were my friends. Living out in the country, I didn't have friends nearby. I had a younger sister, still have a younger sister, but we're 6 years apart. So there weren't a lot of playmates, not a lot of human playmates, which I think led me to spiritual opening quite naturally. So rocks were my friends, you know, the critters in the backyard, you know, or in the fields, those were my friends. The cattle, they were my friends. I didn't understand eating them. So I was very sensitive. And there was not a lot of happiness in my family in terms of my, you know, my parents and my upbringing. So I learned to find that within and in nature very, very early in life. I think I was probably in a very strange and awkward way introduced to the occult through, what's the game manufacturer? I believe it's Milton Bradley, with the Ouija board.
Yeah, I think we've all done that once or twice.
Right, as have my kids, and boy, oh boy, have we had some learnings with that. And you know, I remember sitting in my closet playing with the Ouija board. Like I was trying to hide it from my parents. I'm sure something inherently, in me knew it's about the hidden. And then from there, we grew up. I won't say I grew up in a Christian home, but certainly I grew up in a Christian community. And my grandparents, very rooted in Christianity. So my first framework of spirituality was really through the church. And I found spiritual connections through the church, friendships through the church, relationships, so those were my formative years. Grew up going to Sunday school. And it wasn't until, later in adult life, when I went through some real challenges and waves of that, I guess what some would call the dark night of the soul, started to kind of emerge in my life, and within that, I went back to the church, and really was seeking healing, connection, restoration, mostly to myself, actually. Though I'm not sure I knew it at the time. I think my soul was just hungry and longing. Much of the conditioning in life, for me, as it is for many, was there are external measures of success. And those external measures were clearly defined. And so, as any, bright young student and good girl, good daughter, good student, and later young, good mom, I went for those things, only to find out, as many do, that it's empty. Success is fleeting. And when you get there, it's like, well, now what? Built a business in health and wellness that was very successful. It was supposed to be, at the peak of my career and certainly at the top of the company. And it was empty and meaningless. So throughout those years, really spent a lot of time in the church, found myself in, leadership positions, women's Bible studies in particular, and had what was a real, genuine, true relationship with an energy or an entity that I would call Jesus. And I'm sure many would. So there was a relationship there for sure. But for me, as with many others, the restrictions of the church and the mindset that it supported for me was not supportive in my life. And I reached a point in which, and I knew the Bible forwards and backwards very thoroughly, and I found nourishment in it. When my children were young, I got up every day at 4:00 so I could beat them out of bed and have time for spiritual practice in the morning, which even then, my children are older now. They're 25, almost 26, 21, 22. So, this is when they were very, very young. I remember sitting with my Bible praying, and also my journal, and recording my dreams. So even then, I was starting to develop a dream vocabulary, and found a lot of prophetic wisdom would come through those dreams. And then what happened is, went through a season where I thought, if this God of the Bible is true, then certainly he can take my questions, and he can take my big questions. So I had to leave the church and find out what there was outside of it. And then another big sticking point for me personally was how masculine all of the languaging was in the Bible. And I was searching for a deeper sense of self and truth. So I was not finding that. And my mind wanted to expand. And so that's what happened. I met a guru in Ireland, who's kind of notorious. And having grown up in the church and having that church experience, and finding really a lot of pain in the mindset shift process and the limitations that I'm sure that I took on when I was in the church, as well as early childhood and growing up. It wouldn't surprise anyone to know that I gravitated towards a guru that was a bit culty. But I did learn a lot about the power of the mind, particularly the unconscious mind, and what a driver it is in our choices and in our lives, and even in our capacity for spiritual development. The things that we consciously or unconsciously think about ourselves, the stories that we consciously or unconsciously tell about who God is, who our relationship is, to ourselves, to what we call God, to each other, to the world. And so that went through a major overhaul. Learned absolutely everything that I could, not only from him, but other teachers. And still my children were pretty young, about the power of the mind and how to work with it in terms of what we would now call neuroplasticity. Was not being talked about very much in the early 2000s, I mean, at least not in my, boy, was that a Freudian slip, in the 2000s, not being talked about much at all in my circles. So I really had to seek out teachers. But the fortunate thing was it took me over to Ireland, which ended up bringing me even deeper into my roots, Anglo-Saxon, German, Bohemian roots, and Celtic roots. And from the very first moment that my feet hit the ground, even when the plane landed, my first trip over there, I felt like I was home. And I had friends there already that I had met through my studies with this guru. And I was invited actually to go over to a New Year's Eve party in a castle. So of course you say yes when someone invites you to a New Year's Eve castle party in Ireland. And so many people there that night came up to me and said, "Welcome home." And it was uncanny how many people said that. Now, I later learned the Irish are just very, very friendly. It's very common to say, "You're very welcome here, welcome home," but I really truly felt that in my bones. There was something there. So, to make a long story short, I ended up, because I had a health and wellness business at the time, and one of my goals was an international health and wellness business. So I had an opportunity there to expand the business. And so I took it, was able to get a work permit to be there, which was incredibly synchronous, virtually unheard of. My kids came with me. And one of the practitioners that I sort of called on, we had these products that we were marketing. She was also a shamanic practitioner, and she became one of my first shamanic teachers, she and her partner. And so studied what's called Shlian Kri, the pathway of the heart, and got pretty embedded in the community there. But really and truly, it was wonderful to meet the external teachers. But I've had many, many teachers, as I mentioned when you asked about early childhood. I was always seeking the inner teacher, the intuition, and for me, it's not even so much a sense of a higher self as it is a sense of an innermost self, an innermost sense of wellness, and that well that I know I can tap into and draw from the deities, the benevolent spirit guides and helpers are truly wonderful companions, on this journey. But at the end of the day, when I'm seeking wisdom, it comes from within. From what place, I don't know. Perhaps that, that place where we're all connected to the all that is. And thoroughly enjoyed studying Celtic shamanism. I still study it. I'm still learning absolutely everything that I can. But at the time, I learned more from the land itself than I could say I did from any of the teachers, though I met many wise teachers. Walking the land, just being out in nature. I think I walked myself whole.
Beautiful.
The beautiful cliffs there, overlooking the seaside, being in a very different climate as well, a different culture. I'd already been studying the unconscious mind and how to sort of work with the programs that are there to heal, to release, to let go, to reprogram, etc. So being in a completely different environment than you're used to being in, hearing a dialect, even language, many people that I know still know Gaelic, Irish Gaelic. So these things were very helpful in terms of changing my mind, in beneficial ways. And then fast forward to a very difficult season. In 2009, my children came back to the States to live with their dad. And that was incredibly painful for me. And I was also at a place at that point where everything had gone. Everything on the outside of my life that I had been told is something you're supposed to have, get, do, be, that had all been stripped away. Intentionally, though painfully. I wonder how many people can relate to this, and if you can relate to this. You get this calling from spirit, and spirit is so uplifting, right? It's so expansive. Soul is deepening. And so you get this call from spirit, and it's like, yes, let's go, let's do this. It's really exciting, go. And then you move into it, and then soul kicks in and says, hey, wait a minute, we have some unfinished business. This is what the work is really about. And, in earlier days, earlier on the path, when you don't know that, you think, did I do something wrong? What have I done wrong here? All I've done is followed every bit of guidance. I go to bed every night asking, show me the next step. Show me the next step. And then I find myself gravitating, magically, synchronously towards that next step. And it's certainly back then in 2009 where all I had been doing was living on the edge of a cliff, theoretically, and taking the next step very carefully, to find myself feeling so empty, and really not at all well practiced in being in that emptiness and being in the void, was incredibly painful. So I met a really important teacher who I remember said to me at that time, you still have work to do. And she meant in here, not out there. You still have work to do. And you don't have to do it. But if you don't, this time away from your children will have been for nothing. And it landed in me in a way that I already knew it was a confirmation. I knew that. And so I dug in. I stopped looking at what is the work that I'm supposed to do in the world, and which is very hard for me. My sun is in Leo, my moon is in Taurus, and my north node is in Aries. So I just am always looking for, go for it. Let's move here. A lot of fire, but I had to sit and just be with myself and absolutely everything that would come up, and seek to transform and heal that. And what happened was I met a very significant soul connection. I remember reading a book, this little booklet by Elizabeth Prophet. I wonder if you know it. It was about karmic partners, soulmates, and twin flames. And I remember reading that little book and thinking, well, I know the karmic partner thing. And I know the soulmate thing, which can sometimes feel more like a cellmate than a soulmate. But I thought this twin flame thing looks pretty intriguing, right? And again, just like spirit is, you get really excited about something. And so I did. And it was within a few months, I had a friend. We were, kind of more colleagues / friends. And I invited him to come over and do a workshop over in Ireland. And something happened on that trip. And he was having dreams. I was having visions that we were angelically married. It was all very weird, kind of things that happen. But it became very clear that we had work to do together. And it feels really great and wonderful, early days. And then you dig in and start doing the work and you find out you're just going to be gutted. It's all coming up and it's all coming out, And both of us practiced a dowsing system at that time called spiritual response therapy, or SRT, and checked it out. And we had friends check it out for us, and that's what showed up. It was this kind of, twin flamey connection. So I kind of chuckle when I hear people talk about that now, if they've not ever had an experience like that, or if they think they've met someone and maybe possibly this is like a twin flame. No, if it is, you're locked in, you're doing the work. The twin does not run. That doesn't happen. They don't do that because you can't run. Two people who are committed to the work and really dedicated to it, you're just stuck in to do the work. So long and short of it, I remember specifically a conversation. He wanted to have a Kundalini awakening. That's something he was going for. He really wanted it. And I thought, okay, it's not like I was opposed to it. It's just not something I thought I'm going to go for that, However, it did happen. I remember we did a lot of dream work, built a dream temple in the astral realms, a place that we could visit each other in dreams, or even meditations together, etc. And certainly didn't even need to be physically in person for that to happen. And so what happened was, over the course of about 6 weeks, for me personally, I felt like my body was burning. It was this slow sense of burn where underneath the skin, I could feel just a tingling that did not end. It would, I won't even say dull. The intensity would lessen at times, and then I would wake right back up to it. This went on and on and on for weeks, and then it continued months after that, but not consistently. It would come back again, and then there would be a lull, and it would come back again. It would be a lull. And it was just burning up absolutely everything. I think burned up all the karma, all the junk, all of the pain, the baggage from, at least from this life, if certainly there were more, and I think that what happened for me ultimately was it finally reset me. There was an ultimate reset where I realized, okay, I can build a life from the inside out now, as opposed to spending all my life up till then building it from the outside in. Here's the things I'm supposed to have, things I'm supposed to do, places I'm supposed to be. They're going to make me happy and whole. And so everything from there just came from a sense of wholeness.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little about how you approached that? Because a lot of people, when they start having experiences like that or sensations like that, might get afraid, like something's wrong. I don't like this. I want this to stop. So can you tell us what was your approach, and what was the insight that enabled you to just allow that to happen and to move through to fruition?
Yeah, I was pretty humbled at that stage, right? So I think that was a big part of it, was humility. And like I said, I had no intention to seek it. And it wasn't bothersome, it wasn't. Now, he was having different experiences, where, and let me just say this too, because oftentimes I hear men talk about what a Kundalini awakening feels like, and I can tell you it was not the same for me. And this is the way that I will, to me, it's very much like an orgasm. And I say that because there were days I would wake up having one. That's a really awkward, vulnerable thing to say on a podcast, but I would just wake up that way during those 6 weeks. And for women, it's a full body experience. For men, it's different, right? So it makes sense to me, just if my logical mind thinks about it, for a male, it can shoot right up the spine. You know, I hear a lot of stories about it shoots right up the spine from the tailbone, out of the pelvis up into, blows through the energy systems and right out through the crown, etc., and starts affecting electronics around us, you know, electricity, etc. And those kind of weird things were happening for him for sure. Now, my personal experience of it was not painful, nor was it really pleasurable. And I absolutely knew, because of the intentional work that we were doing, you know, I was going into dream temples that I had built in the astrals, with all manner of symbology, archangels, what's known as an energy known as Saint Germain, you know, in the violet flames. So I knew that's what it was, and that's what it, in my frame of reference at that time, was that's what's burning through me. So sensorially, I'm very, very sensitive anyway. But I just knew it was not a bad thing. I don't know that it was a good thing. It just, you know, I was liking the results, I should say. My spiritual practice was incredible at that time. I was very receptive, met an energy known as Kuan Yin, that Stephen's very familiar with. And just, I think I was able to embody that compassion in a way that I never, ever knew before. Certainly not going through Christianity. I did a little bit of Zen Buddhism study. I didn't feel it at that time, but after going through that depth of physiological, spiritual awakening, it was very present for me.
Can you, just one more from me, and then I'll let you get in here, Stephen. Can you tell us a little bit about, do you have a daily spiritual practice or anything that you might recommend to our viewers, to our listeners?
Yeah, in terms of a daily spiritual practice, one of the most important things for me is spiritual hygiene. So I do a lot of work out in the world now. And because I'm so sensitive and receptive, I have to do a clearing multiple times throughout the day. And by multiple, I mean, you know, certainly every morning. That is how I start my day. And so I douse. I do a lot of dousing with pendulum. I meditate quite a bit. I do a lot of intention setting. But for me, and I will say is also a practice in Celtic shamanism, is that when we go to sleep, the next day really begins at dusk. So it's very intentional and even ritualistic about how I go into the sleep state at night. So for me, the day begins with my sleep and just before bed, and setting intentions for the dream space at night. Sometimes if I'm, you know, grappling with something or need answers, where before I used to say, show me my next step. Now I'll dream on something for 3 nights in a row. Dream incubation is what some people call it. And then I'll just wake up. And if I get something in my sleep, I'll jot it down. I don't take a lot of time to write my dreams, as I have in other seasons of my life. Right now, I might write a few things down, or I might not even remember it upon awakening, but I'll be driving down the road and I'll see something and there it will come to me. I'll remember it, you know, and then I keep a notebook in my car all the time. So I might jot something down if I'm sitting at a red light or when I get to my destination. And then in the mornings, it depends on if I have to leave, you know, to be in an appointment immediately, or if I get a little bit of time to linger at home. So my daily practice kind of looks, you know, like that. I also do a lot of movement. Movement is spiritual practice for me for sure. It helps me keep my heart and my mind lined up, because my mind tends to run a little too fast sometimes.
Nice, thank you.
Lisa, I just before I ask you a question about dreams and dream circles, I'm just curious if somebody listening was to connect with what you mentioned about clearing, and they would wonder, how do you go about doing that? Because I'm sure some people don't know exactly what that means. So if you were to recommend a simple clearing practice, just something simple that people could do, what would you suggest?
Sure. All right. So my favorite, now I studied dowsing with multiple people, but I have to tell you, my very favorite teacher, who I absolutely love and adore, is Raymond Grace. He calls his wisdom hillbilly logic. Sometimes I think he lives in the Appalachian Mountains. And anyway, he's a pretty well known in the dowsing community. And so everything's very, very simple, very basic, very few words. So the very first thing that I do when I sit down to douse in the morning is I balance my polarities and my magnetism. And then another thing that I do is make sure, because the earth is so, the magnetic poles are a bit wonky, is I make sure I optimize the spin of my brain. And what happens when you're dowsing is the pendulum, you develop a relationship with the pendulum. It swirls in one or other direction. Either energy's clearing out or it's coming in. So as soon as I feel really clear, then I'll start saying intentions for the day. Filling myself with the spirit of love, the spirit of peace, joy, happiness. I also say I repel any and all negative, harmful energies from my life and my body. So protection, there's a lot of protection. There's some crazy people out in the world. You might have met a few of them.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's intentional breath that goes with that as well. So if I'm clearing, there's a certain type of breathing, if I'm feeling anxious, if there's anxiety, then it's slow, steady, quiet, longer exhales. Lengthen the exhale in relation to the inhale, which for me, that's usually what I'm having to do, is calm myself.
Beautiful. So is there a particular intention, say a positive intention, that you'd recommend people use? Because you've talked about the repelling one. What about an intention you use generally to help?
Simple, basic, easy, that I'm in the right place at the right time with the right people for the right reasons.
Ah, yeah, that's good. That's great. No, I think intentions are wonderful, because I've been in the company of so many people, and they use particular intentions, and when you hear them, of course, they're exactly right for them. And I think intentions are enormously powerful. Kevin, I recommend that as part of all the practices when people sit to meditate, to make those intentions. So yeah, that's wonderful. So speaking to the global dream circles, I know just from having been personally involved in the global dream circles with you and with Terry and John, there's this wonderful connection that we make to people through dreams and through visions. So I'm just curious if you'd be happy to share how you first came, because really you founded the global dream circles, and you had a particular connection, a very mystical connection, with how all that came about, and you've got a already established connection with the Achua peoples of the Amazon. So I'm curious if you could share all that. There's a great story and a wonderful dream and so on with the founding of this whole beautiful project called the Global Dream Circle.
Sure. It is a really great story. It was amazing. I practice what's called Imrama, which is a wonder voyage or an active imagination dream state, which is part of Celtic shamanism practice. And so I was in a journey, and typically that's how I receive information, is if I go into a journey. If it's not happening in my sleep, then it's happening in an intentional journey that I'm taking. And this was about a year ago now, a little over a year ago. We were coming right into the south season, and I had just done huge south practice, which is a south fire. And so within days of having done that fire, I had this journey. I knew that it would be significant because typically I really have to work myself into the journey space. You know, there's a tree you go to in your meditation. You go to the world tree, you know, that kind of thing. You go through a dismemberment, et cetera, and immediately 4 key guides, animal spirit guides, showed up, and they were right by my body. There was no distance. They were right there. Wolf was sitting on my north side, and eagle was sitting on my east. A great serpent at my south, and a stag and a doe who were at my west. These are really, really key totems in my life and also in Celtic shamanism. And so immediately there were 2 men. I saw myself moving into kind of this dark forested area. And mind you, I'd been seeing these men in my, you know, kind of third eye for a couple of days, sort of calling to me. And, you know, at this stage in my life, I've learned to say, not now. I'll be with you, but not now. And it was now, it was time. And so immediately went right off with them, and I followed them on a footpath, and there were 2. And I heard Achawar. And I thought, is this their name? And then because they looked very similar to each other, but you know, you're in a journey space and you can't really let your left logical, rational mind kick in too much. You really got to stay in that imaginal realm, right? In that space. So continued to follow them, was shown a number of things. One was there was this huge chasm that looked like a split in the earth, perhaps a mile wide or so. And when I looked at it, it was this dark crevice. I was pretty concerned. And then as soon as I started to feel some sense of concern, I noticed that there were pillars of light that I have seen many times, starting, you know, my years in Ireland. They look like great pillars. They're sort of pink, and they're shaped like this, like a cone, like a funnel, like energy moves through them. And then they have these strands, blue and golden strands that look like DNA, and they run all along the perimeter of this, you know, pillar. And I saw discs, like round discs like this, going in and out of them, kind of sliding down in them. And I knew as I proceeded that I needed to work with, there's an energy that we use called, I say we in Celtic shamanism, invisibility. So sometimes you work with the energy of invisibility to maintain no footprint. Sometimes you're doing it because you're sort of energetically not wanting to be seen, not wanting to be detected. So I don't know how much level of detail you actually want me to go into here, Stephen, but I'm trying not to filter out too much. And so we proceeded. There was a huge boa, you know, that was there, who was sort of showing us down this footpath, and we were being very discreet as we moved down the footpath. And then we came out through this clearing, and in the clearing there was this wide open space. I knew the area of the clearing very well, and I knew at that time to pay attention to my dreams. Now, whether they told me that, it's not like I heard it, like I heard Achawar, but I knew to pay attention to my dreams at that time. So I continued, you know, that was coming towards the close of that journey, and I continued to go back in to receive more information, started learning about the women of that culture. And typically when I have information like this come through, I have to resist like just wanting to go to the internet and look it up and go, what is that? You know, what is that about? And so finally I did. And I saw Achuar, that's a tribe down in the rainforest. Wow. And they're a dream culture. So I learned more about their practices, and then connected with someone who's very connected to the Achuar people there, and learned that they have a morning dream practice. So every morning, the very first thing that they do is gather together as a family, and sometimes as a community, but they come together as a family and they talk about their dreams, and they plan their day around their night dreams, what they've seen in their sleep. And they give guidance, not so much to themselves, but to each other. So sometimes one person, the mother might be dreaming for the son, the daughter might be dreaming even for the neighbor. And then if they come to a place where they either have a really difficult dream or they want more information, then they might go see the shaman, the community shaman. But this is a family practice. I just love that. I loved, my goodness, because the first thing I always want to do when I have this wonderful dream is I want to tell a friend about it. There's a practice I like to use called dream mirroring. Hey, can I tell you about this dream? Can you mirror it to me? So from there, I knew this is the work they're asking us to join in and do. So I did do quite a bit of research. I learned about what's been going on down there in Ecuador. They're kind of at the border of Peru. Learned the history of what's been happening with oil and gas, and how the industry itself has been, exerting itself down there in the rainforest, what the Achuar people have been doing to protect their lands, and what they've been doing to protect their people. And just felt like such a strong sense of connection. Then started seeing their women in dreams, learning about the family garden, and there's the place that the women hold in those communities with just great reverence. And I felt this is important work to do, and it's an important story to tell, that of a people that is still so incredibly rooted into this earth, deeply, inherently, intimately connected on a daily lifestyle basis of being connected to the work. So that's what we did. Got a few friends together, and we started what we call global dream circles, and we come together on a monthly basis and we dream together. We do dream work. The intention then was, my goodness, what could a collective group of intentional dreamers who are awake and conscious, what good could we do together in a dream space? Because I really think that that's where we are. I think that's what we are all called to in some form or fashion, is to dream and actuate this, what we're calling a new world, this evolution, this progression of not just us, our species, not just our star race of humanity, but way beyond even the earth. And certainly every indigenous culture that we know of has some sense of story or memory of relationship with other beings from the galaxy. And we're not here by ourselves. I think we know that, regardless of what the crazy stories are in the media, and I try not to pay attention to them, but I hear a lot of buzz about them. We're all dreaming together, and at the end of the day, is not the only time we go into a dream before we sleep, right? Perhaps this is a dream. Perhaps we're dreaming here together right now, and perhaps there's some aspect of us that is non-local, that is dreaming up this localized being that we see. And if that's the case, and if we're awake enough of us in this dream, what can we dream? There are many things on this earth I think none of us would consciously dream that currently exist and are happening. What would we consciously dream, and how much power is there in not just one person's dream, but the collective dream?
And Lisa, speaking of the collective dream, could you share a little bit about the global retreat, and also just about any up and coming events and how people can find Global Dream Circle.
For sure. We meet every month to dream together, and then we have a retreat coming up in July, the middle of July, on the 15th and the 16th if you're stateside, or in Europe if you're way over in Japan, it's the 16th and the 17th of July, and we're going to do some dream work together at home. It's a virtual retreat, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home and set up your own little dream temple in your space. And we would love to have some new faces, new friends, new souls join us in the Dream Circle. And you can find us at globaldreamcircles.org.
Beautiful. I'm going to pass back to Kevin to just bring this to a close. And I'm just so grateful to have you here, listen to that wisdom. I'm sure people who are listening have gone on a journey themselves, listening to some of those beautiful stories. So I'm just going to pass back to Kevin now to let people know about raising our vibration, and also to thank you for everything that you've brought. All that wisdom, it really is. I wanted you to go on. I wanted to ask lots of other questions, but I thought they'll take us down curly, tunnels into Celtic shamanism and into all the sorts of work that you do. There's almost an entire podcast on all those experiences that you've had, which are obviously so rich. So Kevin, back to you.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Lisa. It was really fascinating to hear your journey. Journey is the word that comes to mind when thinking about this. And I think by sharing your journey, you give all of us permission to take our unique journey. And that's really inspiring. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for the wonderful work you're doing. And thank you all for watching and listening. We really appreciate you joining us here each week. And if you'd like to know more about meditation, awareness practices, spiritual practices like this, you can visit us at raisingourvibration.net. And we'd love to hear from you there. So thank you again, Lisa. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Stephen. Love and blessings to all, and bye for now. See you next time.